Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, I'm actually recording this not on a Friday at the end of the day. It is 10 after 7 on a Wednesday. Uh, I found a little bit of time this week, and I'm kind of inserting this in here for a few reasons, but the biggest one is yesterday was the primary election in Ohio, and Nina Turner lost. I have some thoughts about that. I have some things that I wanted to talk about, and yeah, I'm not super keen on it, to be honest. But just kind of jump in. So Nina Turner, I saw for the first time a few years ago. Bernie was running, and I don't remember where I was. I think I want to say the Orpheum Theater. There was some theater in downtown Phoenix. I was there. I was collecting signatures for myself, so this kind of puts a time box on what the date was. And I think I was. I don't even know. Anyway, Bernie comes in, and before Bernie, Nina's there, and I'm in the theater. She comes up. I'm like, who the fuck is this? I don't really. And, at the beginning. And then she talks, and I was like, by the end of her talk, and I was not, I'm not saying it was a hostile audience, but I was not like there to be, I was there for Bernie. I didn't want to see the other bullshit before him. By the end of her talk, I was fucking down. I really appreciated it. I really was into it. Really liked and followed her after that. I did learn, she voted for Jill Stein. Kind of made me cringe a little bit. I have mixed feelings about that, honestly. Like in 2016, Bernie lost the primary. I was pretty crushed, but I also knew Trump could win, and so I didn't want Trump to win, and I thought it was a very realistic possibility that he might. So I, especially kind of primed from canvassing and making calls for Bernie, went out, volunteered, and made phone calls and canvassed pretty much every week for Hillary from like mid-August, which is coming up today is the 4th. So probably like a week or two from now through November. And I gotta tell you, I don't know if you know Arizona, it's fucking hot at that time of year. It is not pleasant to be walking outside. Now, granted, I'm wearing shorts. I'm doing it in the morning. I'm in circumstances that are as good as they could be practically, but it sucked. I didn't like it. And yet I was out there doing that because I didn't want fucking Trump to win. And I've talked about this before. It's worth doing if you've never done it before. Not the most fun thing. I'm not like a super outgoing kind of gregarious person. I'm not somebody who really wants to knock on random doors and talk to people. There is a weird, you have the van and the voter access network list, and you'll knock on somebody's door, and it's partially nicer that you're asking for a specific person, but also partially creepy. Like, people are by and large pretty off put by their, like, how do you know who I am, or how do you know that this person lives here? Occasionally, you'd also get like a mixed household. Like, you'd get the Republican dad's there, or maybe it's a Republican family, and like you have the name of their like 19-year-old daughter who lives there, who's a Democrat and on your list, and you're like, this is awkward. Or the husband and the wife. Usually the husband's the Republican and the wife is but it goes both ways sometimes. And you get that, and it's awkward. It's awkward. But anyway, you go in, you knock, you talk, and it's worth seeing where people are. One of the biggest things that I discovered canvassing for myself, canvassing for Bernie, canvassing for Hillary, especially the Hillary one, that was not fun, honestly. Like, I didn't want to do it, first of all. I was like motivated, obviously, but did not really it's not that I dislike, I don't actively dislike Hillary. She's gotten a bad rap for, you know, mainly, I would say, sexist, misogynistic reasons. The Republicans didn't like, that she was doing stuff in the 90s and kind of just beat her down for decades. I mean, it's really fucking remarkable and horrible. But I also am not a huge fan. I think she's done things to disingratiate herself with a lot of people. I definitely think also, and I don't really blame her for this. It's one of these things where you can kind of see how it would happen. But I feel like she got so many unfair, things, so much unfair shit from people that she kind of at some point just decided, fuck it. I'm just going to do, what I'm going to do. And I think this is the genesis of the ask forgiveness, not permission decision not to use, government email servers, which ended up being a big, big thing that was not a big deal, but you could understand looking at that, like why. I mean, and I've dealt with government shit many times, and there are a lot of things where you're like, okay, this is the procedure, this is what you're trying to do, and she needed to get email access for a bunch of people, and stuff just was a pain in the ass, and it took forever, and like going through the proper channels, and then at a certain point, you make an executive decision, and you're like, fuck this, we just need email, we'll set up a server, and you can see, like how that goes from there. That kind of thing, when you start doing stuff like that, you're setting yourself up for being attacked. So she already had people attacking her unfairly, and now she's given them some ammunition because she's sitting there going, I'm not, no matter what I do, they're still going to do this shit. It's a problem. I don't know how, in her position, I think you're fucked. I don't think there's any viable solution other than just checking out. And that's not if you're somebody who actually cares about stuff, that's also not a solution. And so it's just a shitty, all around garbage situation. But, I also think, her husband is kind of the tip of the spear of neoliberalism in the Democratic Party. He helped really push the Democrats rightward, which also, followed, and it really left the Republicans unchecked. There's nothing like counterbalancing. If the Republicans are already pretty far right, the Democrats start chasing them, now there's nothing holding the Republicans back. So, if there was some kind of tension and counterbalance, it keeps people reasonably in check and moderate, if you will. But if everybody's going further and further rightward, it doesn't work. I just read something today that was in NPR, and it was about cinema, and basically said, I can't even not. It's hard not to laugh at this shit because it's such bullshit. But it was basically saying, "Oh, I just totally believe in moderate." I'm using giant air quotes if you're listening and not watching, but moderate positions are how things should work. You should have compromise, and yeah, actually, if you know nothing about politics, if you know nothing about the last 30 years, 40 years of history, you know nothing about political science or what the range of positions is, you know nothing about how far the American center of gravity has shifted rightward, then yeah, that sounds great. That actually is, from a position of ignorance, absolutely correct. I totally agree. When you actually factor in reality, not such a great plan. This is the kind of plan that keeps getting the Republicans, I mean, right now the Republicans pretty much everywhere, certainly in my state, are just off the fucking reservation. They're in la la land. I mean, not only do they have laws in place to ban mask mandates, vaccine mandates in a fucking pandemic, they're just like fucking Looney Tunes. Just bonkers, completely insane. But I don't really want to talk about that, but you keep, they're going there. There's no counterbalancing force really. And you have people like Sinema who just keep chasing that way. And they're like, I don't think Sinema, like personally, I don't think Sinema has any inherent, I don't think she has core values or a political compass of her own. I don't think she has any inherent direction. I feel like, and I think this is not inaccurate, that basically she is governed entirely by doing the things that she thinks are going to help her. And when she was younger, she thought being a rebel and doing the sort of radical hair and all this shit was going to help her. And then she learned, and I'm not saying that, when I say she learned, I want to be very careful not to say this is the only way. But she definitely learned that a path, and a path of very little resistance, is first off this kind of bullshit where people are dumb, people are ignorant, and I wish this wasn't true. I'm not saying like everybody, but there are a shit ton of people who do not pay attention to politics. They don't pay attention to the news, they don't pay attention to anything. And to such a person, if you say, like, well, the moderate position is that, yeah, it sounds good. That's the kind of thing that gets people clapping when they're fucking dumb. It's insanely stupid, don't get me wrong. But, and it's completely antithetical to reality and where we are. But on the surface, for somebody who doesn't know anything, it sounds great. It sounds great. And so she's like, okay, I'll do this. I'll raise a shit ton of money and just tell people what they want to hear. And it works. It is a viable strategy. Unfortunately, it sucks ass that it's a viable strategy. I hate that this is the situation we find ourselves in. But that is definitely, like, if you don't care about anything and you just want to be in political office, that is a definite recipe. Just be completely cynical. Don't stand for anything. Raise as much money as you can. Do whatever the donors want you to do. And just say a bunch of bullshit that gets people clapping who don't know anything. Totally works. And so I think there's a certain reflection of that in the Nina Turner, Chantal Brown election that just happened. And I think it's an interesting situation because there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I mean, first off, Nina Turner, I generally like. The Jill Stein thing is not like a unrecoverable offense for me. It makes me cringe knowing how bad Trump was, not doing everything he could to stop him. But also, I totally understand and even agree with the philosophy that, following, like, say the Democrats shut down Bernie, which they did twice, and then giving them your vote anyway, or me giving my vote to Kyrsten Sinema, it does not end well. It just progressively makes things worse and worse. This is the problem with being a moderate in a situation like what we have today, because that level of moderation, that lack of counterbalance, that lack of, any kind of opposing force, all it does is lets the Republicans continue unchecked while the Democrats get dragged further and further into right world. It's fucking painful. And when you look at things like us spending a fifth of our GDP on healthcare and getting shittier healthcare with worse outcomes and shorter lifespans and decreasing life expectancies, things like this, having medical bankruptcies, all the bad things that we have in America are just, those are moderate positions, essentially. Having the situation that we have now and progressively getting worse is the moderate position. It's very tempting for people to say, okay, well, Scott, understand this is the ground that we're on, this is the situation we're in. Isn't it better to do a small good thing over time and you keep doing that and then eventually you get someplace better? And I'd say no, abso-fucking-lutely not. And the reason, there are many reasons, but one of the big reasons is make no small plans. I'm going to fuck up the quote. I don't have it to hand, but there's something, make no small plans. They have no power to stir men's souls. Sexist, sorry. Um, you know, and they're very unlikely to, it's like you're making this tiny little thing. This is what you're aiming for. And nobody's going to get excited about it. And you're not even likely to accomplish it in the first place. Make big plans. Don't even say like Medicare for all. Say fucking National Health Service for the United States. Like literally, put your fucking stake in the ground at socialized medicine. And then first off, you have a big objective, like a moonshot kind of thing. That drives people. That is a thing that people can organize around. That's a thing that is much more likely to happen, paradoxically, because you're aiming way out here and you have room to fall back to. Like you can fall back to Medicare for all or something of the sort from that. Whereas if you're saying like, okay, we're going to take the insurance industry, which is for profit, and we're going to let them basically write the legislation that lets them get shit tons of public funding, mandates for various things, and then ends up, giving everybody kind of insurance-ish, maybe, but leaving millions behind, and then also making that insurance, air quotes insurance, progressively worse. Over time, like when the ACA passed, the insurance that you had from the ACA was not great, but it was okay. But over time, the deductibles keep getting bigger, the coverage keeps getting worse, the companies entering the field keep getting worse. You start having things like Kushner's Oscar Health, just getting in there, and they're just sitting there going like, hey, there's a lot of money to be made here, especially if we don't actually cover things. And especially if we do things like if somebody can't pay for a month, we're not going to take a credit card because, heaven forbid that they could actually float that. We're just going to kill their insurance, even if they've made it to, this actually happened to me if it sounds personal. Few years ago, before we had medical insurance with my company, didn't have a lot of money, and there was like a dry couple of months, and I think it was in the summer, got like to July or August paying the premiums, and then can't do it. Now granted, there might have been something I could have done then, although it was a pain in the ass and it was not trivial to do that. You can go to, and at the time especially, like the healthcare.gov was shitty, their 800 number was shitty, it's like hours of stuff. And also I'm a relatively healthy person who doesn't go to the doctor often. So you start like weighing things, and at a certain point you're kind of like, well, okay, I'm not gonna fuck with this anymore. I called and tried to pay with a credit card, couldn't do it. I have overdraft protection, but at the time that was completely used up because I didn't have any money coming in, and I had other bills that had to go. So I lost my insurance that year because of this shit, which was Oscar because I'm a fucking idiot, and I'm embarrassed by the fact that I picked that, but it sounded like the best of several shitty options that I had, or at least their marketing was decent. Terrible fucking insurance, again, air quotes. Lost the insurance, and I found out though I had to go to the doctor for something, I don't know, asthma or something. A couple months later, paying out of pocket was actually cheaper than my deductible was when I had the ACA plan. That feels a little bit fucked up and wrong. I don't know, like what metric you work under, but that is not the way it should be. I mean, it's just shitty, the fucking point of insurance. And that was, I'm paying, at the time I was paying a decent amount for insurance. And then there's also a subsidy, which was significant. The insurance company taking a lot of money, but somehow with the insurance, I was paying more. Now, granted, if I had something truly, truly catastrophic happen, I would have been fucked. But even with the insurance, I probably would have been fucked. And, you just look at that situation and it's so shitty. That is what that incrementalism gets you. And that's like a good outcome. We actually got the ACA passed and it's still here. A bad outcome is we're going to aim for something that is nothing not get it, and then, just we're fucked. Nothing. That's it. Good fucking show. So I do not believe in small changes in this sense. I think it's a terrible fucking thing. I fundamentally think that is not the way to do things. Now, I do think compromise and actually like understanding other people's positions and trying to find things that are mutually beneficial is good. But it doesn't work when you don't have, like if you are essentially the air quotes moderate Kyrsten Sinema or Manchin, who's essentially a 1980s Republican, at least in terms of function. And again, I don't believe Sinema has really any political compass at all. But if she was going to be placed someplace, it's definitely like 1980s Republican. So you look at that and you're like, okay, she is making a compromise with people who are already like far to the right. And her compromise position is shitty. I mean, there are really good graphs that show the proposed, right now this is talking about the infrastructure plan. They show the proposed values and then they show what happened to it with the air quotes compromise. And you get the people like Sinema and Romney who have positioned themselves in this, like, oh, I'm above politics. These people are just assholes. I mean, you look at what they've done and it's essentially a dried up Republican plan with no way to pay for it. Somehow these fuckers have convinced people that they are fiscally responsible. And yet, you look over time and you look every fucking administration, every time the Republicans control the budget, the deficit goes up. They cut taxes, they increase spending. They have a saying, like they call Democrats tax and spend. The difference is, of course, the Republicans spend, they just cut taxes, so they're increasing spending and not having any way to pay for it. Now, I don't want to get into MMT, modern monetary theory. I think it's bullshit. It is not totally bullshit. There is some kernel of truth to it. It is true that to some extent, it basically, I don't know. Again, I don't want to go into great depth. It's not totally false. It has some element of truth, but it's also demonstrably false because you can take it to, just do a thought experiment and say, okay, well, you can just manifest this amount of money out of thin air and it just works. Well, what if we scale that up and scale that up and scale that up? There's certainly a point where this does not work. This is not controversial to say this. And to me, that pretty much disproves the principle. The whole idea is basically that taxing doesn't go to spending, but basically when you tax money, it's annihilated. And when you spend money, the government, it's created. It feels to me like somebody got like a pop culture version of Feynman diagrams and they're trying to apply that to finance, and went about as well as you would think. But anyway, I do think it's interesting, at least in the sense that, there is something to be said for you could spend much more than your revenue and it's not that big of a deal. And also, certainly right now when interest rates are fucking low, you can spend a shit ton and it's almost free money. If you're making investments in things, it's actually unconscionable that we're not spending shit tons of money right now investing in things because you can't get a better deal. You have money that does come almost for free and it's going to have dividends that pay off over the years. So not doing that is just utterly irresponsible. That part is true. Investing in people and having, decent health care, keeping people from getting fucking evicted. Things like this that should be just no-brainers. Yeah. So again, like this moderate position, the air quotes moderate position, the true moderate position that Sinema is selling, the like real thing that she's selling a shadow of would be, I want universal healthcare. I want, universal college tuition. I want this, I want that. And then you talk to a Republican or somebody who's pretty different, and they're like, oh no, I don't want that. And what we do is find things where we can actually compromise. And the compromise does not have to be like, I give up my universal health care. It could be, I get my universal health care, and which is incidentally fiscally just the right thing to do, but in addition to being morally and ethically the right thing to do. But I get that, and then maybe you find something else that you want, and we both, maybe we both give up something small, but maybe not. Maybe we both get something. You can find mutually beneficial arrangements like that without going just into fucking right wingsville. It's ridiculous where we are. And especially also, the very premise that you want to be, like balanced and fair with people who are just, again, out in the fucking ocean, like deep, deep ocean kind of insanity levels. It's nuts. It's just nuts. I do hope that this, I'm very concerned about sort of our future, not just, obviously climate change worries me, especially given that we're not doing much with it. The pandemic, I do think, I'm pretty cautiously optimistic that in a relatively short period of time, and incidentally, relatively short period of time could be several years to 5 years, but in a relatively short period of time, I do think this kind of resolves itself. Unfortunately, a lot of people die and get sick in the meantime, and needlessly so. And it's like, but the worst case scenario is basically we let it run its course, and all the susceptible people eventually get it, or they're in pockets where they're protected by herd immunity, and like lots of people die, but then it sort of burns itself out. That is a thing that could happen. Not wise or the right thing to do, not like a thing that anyone should want to have happen, especially given that you have the technology to make very safe and effective vaccines very quickly. And you know enough about public health, you know enough about germ theory and how these things are spread and all this kind of stuff to be able to avoid that. Like, we don't need to go down that path. That is a path that we can do, but it's a dumb fucking path. It is a cruel path. It is a needlessly just murderous path. And it is really statistical murder to go down that path knowing better. If you don't know any better, then that's, I guess, fine. You're in medieval Europe and you have not yet had any kind of idea of, germ theory or public health, epidemiology. These things haven't been invented yet, then maybe that's fine. But in the modern world, if you're like a Doug Ducey and you're just obstinately, either you're a complete moron and you just don't know any better, or you actually do know better and you're just playing to the audience. Either way, what he's doing is contemptible, and it is killing people. Like, definitely statistically killing people. And I do think statistical murder should count as murder. If you do things that lead to hundreds of thousands of people dying who wouldn't have died if you didn't do those things, you're fucking responsible. Anyway, rolling back to Nina. So Nina lost, and I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on that. The biggest one is obviously a lot of disappointment. I don't feel great about it. It was also disappointing to see how many people, because obviously I'm on Twitter a lot, you see how many people were for Chantal and Chantel. I didn't either know nor care what the fuck Brown's first name is. Whatever her name is. That's, I could care less. I could not care less. That would be it. But anyway, I don't care. But I saw so many people for this person, and it's just like annoying. It's, a few months ago, this person was not, like essentially did not exist. functionally speaking. And Hillary Clinton comes in, and a bunch of Democratic leadership came in. A bunch of people came in, a bunch of dark money came in, these flyers and mailers that were just essentially lies went out. And, it was this huge push for this person. And I wasn't too surprised when she won, because it was like, okay, you have all this shit. And I mean, I'm not saying there's a lot you could do about it, but I didn't really get the feeling that Nina was doing the stuff that it would take. I don't know, in that position, I don't know what you do, but I don't feel like what she was doing was like, you're looking at it and you're like, this is not good. And I wanted her to win, mainly because, I look at the squad and this kind of stuff. I follow a lot of people on Twitter also. So I've got a bunch of people on Twitter who were like, I would say, I'm not going to say brainwashed exactly, but they definitely really bought into a lot of bullshit about these two candidates that's just not grounded in reality. And then I also have people that I follow who are super for Nina, but a subset of them are now talking about like, oh, we should just boycott elections and the electoralism is bullshit. And I mean, I'm sorry, fuck you people. Like, honestly, the fact that the thing that is funny here is that all this money, all these people of power came in to shut down this one race, to stop one candidate out of 435 in the House. This is not a sign that you should not play. This is a sign that, like, they care. That one person matters, and they're scared. They're honestly like shitting their pants. And to me, I mean, that is something that you should find encouraging. It's like, yeah, they won this time. They can't win every time. And especially, again, 435 seats that come up every 2 years. Run people fucking everywhere. Like, it's dumb not to. It's just not wise not to. Run people also everywhere in state houses and state senates and all this kind of stuff. But, the fact that they're so scared of one person doesn't tell me like, oh, the squad is bullshit and all this stuff. Like, the squad is a handful of people out of, again, 435. And in the Senate, it's maybe, depending on how you count and how generous you are, a few out of 100. Getting more people in these two places gets us a lot more power. And people have these just insane, unreasonable expectations, like, a handful of people are going to be able to do something. A handful of people can shut stuff down, kind of. It's definitely possible. I mean, you see Sinema and Manchin. The power of a couple people. Again, that's 2 people out of 100, and you scale that up to 435. It's, like 8 people, which is, those 2 people proportionally are already like the extent of the squad now, if not more. So that should immediately sort of make you think, But also, if you're trying to stop stuff, if you're trying not to do stuff, much easier to do that than to actually push for legislation. You don't need alliances, you don't need partnerships, you don't need to work with people to keep stuff from happening. So people look back at the Tea Party and they're like, oh, well, they were successful. And yeah, they were successful. But first off, they got a lot more people elected. They did a good job of getting people, like shitty, horrible stuff, but they accomplished a lot of their goals. They got people in. They're trying to stop stuff and put wrenches in things. It's a lot easier when you have a lot of people and you're trying to stand in the way of progress than, you have a few people and you're trying to do stuff that's big. We need more people. That's pretty much my takeaway. And I mean, it's just statistics. It's not like it's just a mathematical reality of the situation. So I see people talking about that. I see these people who I'd basically classify as just idiots. I mean, like saying boycott elections and all this bullshit. Just no. I mean, come on. How fucking dumb are you? And again, obviously, the fact that they went to these lengths to stop one person, the takeaway there is Yeah, they're fucking scared. They're scared. That is a sign that you should fight more, not less. That is a sign that you should fight harder, not less. So anyway, I don't want to go on for too much longer. I'm gonna, I think, take off in a couple minutes. So with that, I think that'll be all I have to say here. I do want to say, I guess, the depressing thing, and I don't think this goes back to the cinema thing, but the cinema path works. It doesn't accomplish anything other than personally, enriching yourself pretty much and getting yourself in a position of power and getting attention, which she apparently enjoys, even the negative attention. But it doesn't actually get you someplace where you can make real change. But there is something to be said for working with people and for trying not to just thumb your nose at people. And one of the reasons that Nina suffered the way that she did was that she kind of told the party to go fuck themselves, and the party told her to go fuck herself. I mean, it's not... Now, that doesn't quite explain the proportional or the disproportional level that they went to. I do think part of that was certainly, like, Hillary saw it as a proxy war against Bernie, and so many other people just hate Bernie. Like, the level of hatred that people have toward this man who spent his whole fucking life trying to help people and make things better is just, like, I can't fathom it. It's just like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? It's like not wearing a mask in a fucking pandemic and banning it even. But it's just so goddamn dumb. I do think the cinema path, not so good. The Nina path, maybe not the best. I also, like, there are things that I'm not super fond of with her. You go to her Twitter bio. I mean, aside from the Jill Stein thing, which I'm just not gonna say again, but not good. In her Twitter bio, she's got God in there. Now, I understand a lot of people are really religious. This means something to them. I'm sure it means something to her. I find that off-putting. I don't want politicians who... And it's not that I want politicians not to be religious, although to me that would be fucking fantastic. But even if you are religious, bringing your religion into politics, to me, and it's one of the problems with religious people, because it's something that informs and kind of permeates their entire existence, but it's also something which does not belong in the public sphere. It's like, okay, your religion, all that stuff, it's its own thing. Now, you're free to do it. You're free to do whatever with it. You should, fucking churches should pay taxes, mind you, but you should still be free to practice and not suppressed for it. But you also should not bring that into running for office. You shouldn't bring that into your public life so much. It's kind of like, and I'm not saying you should hide it necessarily. I'm just saying, like, you don't need to make it like a central thing that you're, I mean, I'm non-religious. I probably wouldn't put unreligious in my Twitter bio. Your Twitter bio is very short, and these are like the things that matter the most to you. It's hard to put a lot there. I have ACAB in there, which probably would kill me for, actually running for office. I have a lot of stuff in my Twitter that probably would not help me if I ever ran for office. But nothing about religion. So yeah. And I do think, like, the ACAB thing, I stand by that. I do really think all cops are bastards. I think the police as they exist now should be abolished. And I was reading somebody today who had something that said, like, I'm sure, 100 years ago abolished slavery, or 150 years ago, or whatever it was. Obviously, I have a real firm grasp on history. But, before the Civil War, abolished slavery, not so popular. Turns out it's still the right thing. The cinema path, which is sort of the path of least resistance, not really good. And while it's easy, it doesn't accomplish anything. And it actually makes things worse, because every time there's a person like Cinema or the person who beat Nina, you have one more roadblock to actually getting shit done that matters. It's depressing. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to go on for too much longer, and I do want to go for a walk. So with that, I'll blather more about this, I'm sure, but I think that's cover the main bullets for me for now. Anyway, have a good night or good day, whatever it is for you. It's Jen.